Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Jacob Teacher YouTube channel. Welcome back if you've seen me here before, and welcome if this is your first time. I hope that you are all doing well wherever you are in the world. And why don't you tell me where you are in the world right now if you're already watching? Let me know where you're watching from and introduce yourself. I have the chat room open here, and yes, you know the drill. Let's have a good lesson tonight. Let's talk a lot. We have a lot to talk about. I am predicting right now that this will already be a long lesson. This might be one of my longest. We'll see though. I'm not exactly sure. Okay, so Estella is here. Abo is here. Hello to both of you. Thank you for joining me on this lovely Friday evening for me. Friday evening for me, of course, in Korea over here. Alan is joining us too. Alan, good to see you again as well. So, as the title and the picture suggests, oh, and we have Sam joining us too. Hello, Sam. Thanks for joining. As the title suggests, we're going to be talking about Pinocchio today. We're going to be talking about specifically one song in the movie Pinocchio, I've Got No Strings. In order to do this, we're going to talk a little bit about the story of Pinocchio, at least the parts that lead up to the song, and then we will spend a little bit of time talking about the song, okay? Estella says it's 8 a.m. in Argentina. Well, good morning to you, Estella. Sam says, it's nice to see you again. It's nice to see you again too, Sam. Gofrain, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Hello, thank you for joining. And let's start, okay? With this lesson, this is going to be one of those lessons where I talk more than usual, more than I normally do. If you're confused about something, if you're confused about something that I say, words that I use, phrases that I use, just ask me a question in the chat room. I'm going to keep my eye on the chat room. I'm going to pay attention to the chat room and try and answer your questions as they come. I also have questions for you that I will ask at different points during the presentation today. So let's start. Let me just switch screens here. I've Got No Strings from Pinocchio. Now, I'm sure that this is a movie that, a story that we are at least somewhat familiar with. Many of us, I'm sure, watched this movie as children. Maybe we've watched it with our own children, who knows. But it's a very famous story, of course, very well known. And one thing that I really like, especially about this song, is that the language is quite simple, but it's also very deep. I think that there are a lot of deep things said in this song, a lot of points that that this song makes that are very interesting to talk about. And we'll talk more about that later into the song, or later into the lesson, rather. But let's start. Pinocchio, what is it about? Okay, so we have this puppet, Pinocchio. This puppet maker creates this puppet, and he wishes that one day the puppet will become a boy. So we have Pinocchio here. Oh, why is that not working? Sorry, my screen is freezing up here. Oh no. Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So we have Pinocchio here. And then a fairy comes in the middle of the night and turns Pinocchio alive. Pinocchio is suddenly alive. He can walk, he can speak, he can do all sorts of things. But the fairy tells him that he's not a real boy yet, that he has to make his own decisions, his own actions, and if he acts correctly, then he will become a real boy. Now, how does he do that? Well, she says, this fairy, she tells Pinocchio that he has to know right from wrong, and he has to choose right. He has to be a good boy. Pinocchio says, how do I do that? Then we're introduced to this character, Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket is the narrator of the story, so he helps tell the story of Pinocchio. He also is Pinocchio's conscience. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the English word conscience because it describes a very complicated concept, an idea, and it's a very important word to know. So what is a conscience? That's what Pinocchio asks right away. He says, how do I know right from wrong? How do I know how to behave? And the fairy says, your conscience will tell you. Pinocchio says, what's a conscience? And Jiminy Cricket says, conscience is that still, small voice that people won't listen to. That's just the trouble with the world today. So what is he talking about? Well, conscience in English is that voice or that feeling that we have inside whenever we are making a decision that that goes against our values. So if we are about to do something that we don't feel good about, that we don't feel right about, that feeling that we have, that voice in our heads or that feeling inside that communicates to us that what we are about to do is not a good thing, that is our conscience. It's that voice inside telling us not to do something or that something is okay to do. So that's what we call a conscience in English. Well, here's an example sentence. My conscience is telling me that I shouldn't do that. My conscience is telling me that I shouldn't do that. So imagine a situation where, okay, so all of us have been in this situation before. We're at a social gathering with other people, and let's say we're eating pizza together, okay? So we're all eating pizza together, and there's only one piece of pizza left. And maybe you want the last piece of pizza, but of course there are these social customs, these social laws that we all kind of follow, where it's rude to just take the last piece of pizza. It's kind of considered rude. So that feeling that you have when you want the last piece of pizza, but inside your conscience is telling you that might not be a good thing. That wouldn't go against your value, or that would go against your values. You would be rude if you did that. That feeling is your conscience. My conscience is telling me I shouldn't do that. Now, there's also this great phrase, and I'm going to ask you a question in a second here, but I want to tell you about this great phrase in English, guilty conscience. So a guilty conscience is the awareness of having done something wrong. The awareness of having done something wrong. So we've already acted, we've already done something, and then afterwards we have this feeling of guilt. And it's our conscience kind of communicating to us that what we did was bad. If we're in that situation, you could say that, if someone's in that situation, you could say that person has a guilty conscience. So here's an example. Jessica didn't get caught stealing, but she had a guilty conscience. Jessica, let's say this woman stole a bag of chips maybe from a 7-Eleven. The store clerk didn't see her. She didn't get caught. But afterwards, she felt guilty. She had something telling her inside that what she did was not okay, that it went against her values. So that's a guilty conscience. And actually, one of my favorite novels of all time, written by also one of my favorite writers of all time. It was written by a man named Fyodor Dostoevsky, a Russian author. The book is called Crime and Punishment. And in that book, the main character, he murders someone. And he doesn't get caught, but the book deals with his guilty conscience. For the rest of the novel, he has this guilty conscience that is tormenting him, that is making him feel terrible inside. So, my question to you, tell me about a time when you had a guilty conscience. Tell me about a time when you had a guilty conscience. So something that you did, and then afterwards you felt guilty about it. You felt guilty inside. You didn't feel good. If you don't feel comfortable telling me about a personal story, Why don't you tell me about something that would lead towards you having a guilty conscience? So some action that if you did, you would have a guilty conscience later, if you completed that action. Okay? I'm going to check back on the comments section now. That was a lot of talking, I know. Okay, so tell me about an action or something that you did in your own life that would lead towards you having a guilty conscience, or that did lead towards you having a guilty conscience. Lanya says, hello. Lanya, good to see you. Thanks for joining. I'll tell you about emphatic, asks Alan. Emphatic. Emphatic just means like really, really excited or really hyper. Emphatic. Really, yeah, hyper. One time, so I used to, with jobs, I used to call in sick to work sometimes. When I was younger, especially, I would do it more often, where if I had a job and I didn't really feel like going to work that day, sometimes I would call and I would say, I'm sick, I can't come in. I would call my boss and I'd tell my boss, I can't come into work today, I'm sick. I wasn't sick, so I was lying. And at the time, when I was younger, I didn't feel so bad about it, but the last few times I did it, I had a guilty conscience afterwards. I didn't feel good lying like that. So it's funny because our sense of what's right and what's wrong, I think, changes as we grow older. At least it has for me. Sadawat, good to see you. Good, yes, perfect. So Sadawat is saying we usually have guilty conscience when we lied to somebody. We usually have a guilty conscience. So we think of conscience as kind of one singular thing. And we often talk about it as if it's an agent. So we can say, my conscience is telling me not to do this one thing. We're speaking about our conscience as if it's an actual living thing, an agent that's communicating to us. And of course, in Pinocchio, it's quite literally a character in the story. So it's Pinocchio's conscience. That's Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket is Pinocchio's conscience. It's an actual character in this movie. Okay? So great, Sadawat. Yes, and I agree. When we lie to people, we often have a guilty conscience afterwards. Unless you're a total psychopath and you have no emotions whatsoever, you normally feel a little guilty after telling a lie. And of course, that's what happens in Pinocchio. His nose grows, right? Alan says, when I was a young boy hunting sparrows and killing them in a violent way, I always have guilty conscience about my huge mistake. Okay, right. So Alan, that's a really, well, thank you for sharing that, first of all. It's a very personal story. But yeah, when we're younger, we do things when we're younger, we're still trying to figure out what is right and what is wrong. So especially when we're young, we often feel like what we're doing isn't right, but we don't really know why. We can't really articulate it. We can't really explain it, but we have this feeling inside, and that's our guilty conscience. So great. Thank you for that, Alan. Sam says, if I beat my brother hardly, I would be feeling a guilty conscience. Okay. Sam, you want to use if I beat my brother hard there. So the adverb form there, if I beat my brother hard, we wouldn't say hardly. If I beat my brother hard, I would be feeling a guilty conscience. Here's how you could rephrase that more naturally. If I beat my brother hard, I would have a guilty conscience. Or you could say I would feel my guilty conscience, but a guilty conscience is more something that we have. We use have to describe that. Great sentences, and thank you for these, for the stories and, yeah, for the sentences. These are really great. Guilty conscience, it's an interesting thing. It's something that we all experience. Okay, so great. Let's keep going. Again, ask me questions if you're confused. I'm going to keep talking for a little while now. So, what happens to Pinocchio? He is on a quest, on a journey to become a real boy. He has to find out what is right and what is wrong, and he has to be a good boy. He has to choose the right way to behave. follow his conscience, listen to his conscience. So what happens? Well, he must learn the difference between right and wrong, and he's on his way to school. I wanted to underline that because I think it's a very important phrase to know in English. If you're on your way somewhere, it just means you're going to that place, but it's a phrase that we use very often in English. So you could replace it here with Pinocchio is going to school, but a very natural way to say it, Pinocchio is on his way to school. He's going to school. We also use this to talk about things that are more abstract. So for example, you could say, he's on his way to fame. It means that he's traveling towards fame. He's going to be famous eventually, or he's traveling towards being famous. So we use it in an abstract sense also. Looks like we got some more questions here. I'm just going to check in, or some more sentences. Gofrain says, I had my parents angry or sad several times ago, and I still have a guilty conscience about that. So Gofrain, you could say, I angered my parents several times, and I still have a guilty conscience about that. Or I made my parents angry several times, and I still have a guilty conscience about that. The second half of that sentence is perfect. I still have a guilty conscience about that. That's good. Abo says, when I see someone poor, I feel guilty conscience about that. Okay, interesting. So when I see someone poor, I have a guilty conscience, or I feel guilty. You could say I feel guilty too, but I have a guilty conscience. So this sense of responsibility that you feel towards someone who is not as wealthy or not as fortunate as you are. Well, that's very interesting. That's a great sentence. Thank you for that. Let's keep going. So Pinocchio is on his way to school. He meets Honest John the fox and Gideon the cat. And these are these two characters that I have in the picture here. And of course, they're not honest at all. So they trick Pinocchio. What we could say in English about them, this is another great vocabulary word to know. You could say that they are con artists. A con artist is someone who tricks another person and gets them to believe something that isn't true. So these two people, they see Pinocchio and they think that they can make money off of him. They think that they can profit from him. So Pinocchio, he tells them, I'm going to school. I'm going to school. I'm on my way to school. And John the fox and Gideon the cat, they say, ah, yes, then you haven't heard of the easy road to success. You haven't heard of the easy road to success. And he's talking about acting, and he tells Pinocchio that he can be a famous actor really easily. He'll be really famous, everyone will love him, and he will rapidly, very quickly, achieve success. Again, there's this phrase, road to success. When we're talking about a road, this is a metaphor that we often use. A road to somewhere just means a path to somewhere. So the road to success, think about an actual road that you travel down, and at the end of the road is success. So we use this metaphor a lot in English. It's good to know. So he tells Pinocchio that you can be famous. It's really easy. You don't need to go to school. And yeah, he tells Pinocchio that he will make him famous. So what happens? Jiminy Cricket, Pinocchio's conscience, the thing that tells us what is right and what is wrong. Pinocchio's conscience is telling Pinocchio not to go. He's saying, don't go, it's a bad idea. But Pinocchio doesn't listen. Pinocchio goes, and he ends up in this puppet show, and he sings this song. That's where he starts to sing the song that we're going to talk about. We're only going to look at the first verse of the song. I wanted to do that just for time's sake. And also, the rest of the song is fairly similar. So you'll be able to understand a lot of it. I actually think I meant to post the video where you can watch the video in which this song is sung. but I think I forgot to do that in the description, so I'll do that afterwards. Anyways, you can understand the rest of the song, I think, quite easily after reading the first verse. But I will read it. I'll check on the comments in a little bit here. And yes, let me read this. I've got no strings. So Pinocchio, again, he's in this puppet show right now. He believes that he's on the path to success. He believes that he's made it, that this is, his conscience is telling him not to do it, but he's doing it anyways. He's tempted by fame, by everyone loving him. He's been tempted by all of these things, even though his conscience says it's a bad idea. So, I've got no strings to hold me down, to make me fret or make me frown. I had strings, but now I'm free. There are no strings on me. So, let's break this down bit by bit. I've got no strings to hold me down. So, Pinocchio, before he was alive, he was what we call a marionette. And a marionette is one of those puppets you can see in the picture that it's a puppet that's controlled by strings above. So someone holds the strings and they control the puppet. That's a marionette. And that's what Pinocchio was. So he's talking about that quite literally here. I've got no strings. He has no strings anymore that are attached to him. I've got no strings to hold me down. But there's also this idiom that I want to teach you that's quite common in English, and it uses the word strings. And that is no strings attached. Okay, no strings attached. What does that mean? No strings attached, it basically means no restrictions or conditions. If you're a little confused, don't worry, we'll look at some examples. We often use this idiom when we're talking about advertising or deals, when we're offering someone a deal. So a deal with no strings attached. Imagine that some company wants to give you a really good deal. Let's say you're signing up for a new phone and they want to give you some other gift. You can say, well, they'll tell you there's no strings attached. And what that means is they want to give you this deal and there's no other secret conditions or anything else that you have to do in order to get the deal. It's a deal with no strings attached. Another way that we use this idiom is to talk about relationships sometimes. So you can see in this picture, this is a movie poster. There was a movie released a little while ago, a few years ago, called No Strings Attached. That was the title, No Strings Attached. And it was starring Ashton Kutcher and Natalie Portman. And what the movie is about is these two characters, they try to have a relationship in which they only have casual sex. So they want to have sex with each other, but they don't want to commit to any of the other stuff that comes with a relationship. So like emotional attachments, all the arguments that come, everything that comes with a relationship, they don't want to deal with that. They just want the casual sex. And that's what the plot of the movie is about. They try to have that kind of relationship. And of course, it's a total disaster. It doesn't work. But again, think of this idiom. There's no strings attached. So what does a string do? A string connects two things together. So this couple, they want casual sex, but they don't want any strings attached. They don't want any of the other commitments or responsibilities that come with a relationship. No strings attached. So to go back to Pinocchio here, he's quite literally talking about having no strings attached to him, but there's also this deeper sense, this metaphor of a string, of responsibility and commitment, of being tied to something, of having commitments. He's saying, I don't have any of those things. an interesting thing to think about. Hold me down. Okay, this is a phrasal verb of hold, and it just means to hold something down, to prevent something from moving, to keep someone or something in one place. So you could say, for example, the police officer held down the robber. This is the robber, and the police officer is here, and he physically held him down. We can use the phrase like that. And remember, held or hold is an irregular verb, so the past tense held the robber down. We also use this in the abstract, so we can say he was held down by his commitment to his wife and kids. What's implied in this sentence is that his wife and kids are keeping him from doing things that he wants to do or that he's thinking about doing. So we use it in a more abstract sense too, of something that holds another person or thing down, keeps them in one place. So I've got no strings to hold me down. I thought I would ask you a question there. What is something that is holding you down or holding you back right now? I know these questions are very personal today, but why not? It's good to be personal. I think that when learning a language, if you can really connect phrases, idioms, and whatever you're learning to your personal life, if you can make some personal connection with these words, you'll be able to remember them a lot more easily. I have holding you back here also in brackets because it's quite similar. So in this case, it means almost the exact same thing. It's preventing someone from moving forward when you hold someone back. And we use it also in the abstract. So yeah, it's the exact same. Let me check on the comment section right now. I believe there were some comments before. Abo says, when I can't help someone, I feel guilty conscience. So just remember, a conscience is singular. It's this singular thing that we're talking about. I feel a guilty conscience. Better would be I have a guilty conscience. Okay? You need there, the determiner I have a guilty conscience. Alan says, the road to success for most companies using by mostly con artists in order to get people tastes in goods by advertising. So I think what you're talking about, Alan, is how sometimes companies and advertising, sometimes that can be a little unethical, and they can convince people to buy stuff that is maybe not in that person's best interest. So yeah, a lot of the time that happens. You're right. Sadawat says, I heard no strings attached when they talk about relationships. Very good. So I think you probably typed that while, or maybe a little bit before I started talking about the movie No Strings Attached. But yes, you're absolutely right. We talk about no strings attached when we're talking about relationships. You're absolutely right. So tell me, what is something that's holding you back right now or holding you down? Maybe I'll share something too, since we're getting personal here. What's holding me back right now? So I'm doing this. I'm trying to be an online teacher, and I'm still working as a full-time teacher in Korea. And I have a contract here that says I'm not allowed to make money doing other stuff online while I'm teaching. So that's holding me back. I want to release my course. I want to start doing private teaching and try and make this an actual business eventually, but I'm held back by my contract. It's holding me down. It's preventing me from doing that. So that's one thing in my life. Okay, good. Sam says, sometimes my eye irritation holds me down from working with a laptop. Okay, it holds me down, holds me back, holds me down. Yeah, holds me down sounds a little strange there. We most of the time do use it when we're talking about physical things, and it's more natural to use a word like a verb like prevents there. So sometimes my eye irritation prevents me from working with laptops or from working on a laptop. You could say holds me back there too. We use holds me back more in the abstract. in those situations. I have held myself back depending on my conscience because I think inner sounds keep me away from some mistakes I would do. Okay, very interesting, Alan. So sometimes, yeah, you can use hold me back like that too. You can say, if your conscience is holding you back from doing something that you know is wrong or that you shouldn't do, that's a good thing too. It doesn't always have to be a negative thing that you're being held back. So great sentence, Alan. Thank you for that. Let's keep going. I will check again on the comment section. Oh, sorry, I missed Sadawat's comment. The contract with my work is holding me down from working privately. If I break it, I have to pay a lot of money. Okay, so Sadawat, we're in a similar situation. So I can empathize with you. Great. Gofrain says, the precious values I have been taught in my childhood are holding me down from doing bad things. Okay, so let me say, I think holding me down here, there are certain situations, I have to think about it because I'm not sure why that sounds awkward to me a little. Holding me back would sound less awkward there. We do use holding me down sometimes in these situations, but most often in these cases when we're talking about abstract things, we use hold me back rather than hold me down. So Gofrain, if you wanted to replace hold me down with hold me back there, it would sound more natural. You could also use the verb prevent. Prevent is a really good one to use here. The precious values I was taught in childhood are holding me back from doing bad things, you could say. And that's good. It means that you were, well, I'm guessing then that you were taught good values, that your parents did a good job raising you when you were young. So that's good. It's good that you feel that way. Let's keep going, okay? The next part of the song, again, I've got no strings to hold me down to make me fret or make me frown. I had strings, but now I'm free. There are no strings on me. So I think that most of you should be able to understand this part of the song, these 4 lines here. The only thing that is perhaps a little difficult is the word fret. So fret is a new word, and fret basically is a fancy way of saying worry. It's almost the exact same as worry. It's maybe a little more constant or more severe than worrying. But almost always you can replace the word fret with worry, and the meaning will be basically the same thing. So it's a fancy way of saying worry. Okay, so here's an example. She fretted about her mother coming to visit. Imagine that this woman has a bad relationship with her mother, and her mother's coming to visit her. That's something to fret about. Again, imagine you can replace the word fret with worry in the same way here, and you'd have basically the same meaning. She worried about her mother coming to visit. She fretted about her mother coming to visit. It's the same thing. Okay? What is something that you regularly fret about? Why don't you tell me in the comment section? What is something you regularly fret about? Well, many things. I fret about many things. I'm quite an anxious person in general, but money is something that I often fret about, something that many people fret about, I think. Having enough money, being able to make enough money, that's something that many people fret about. So tell me what you fret about. Abo says, I miss my key of my car that holds me back to find it. I miss my key of my car that holds me back to find it. Abo, okay. Holds me back to find it. I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to say there. A fretboard in a guitar, says Sam. So Abo, why don't you try again. Tell me what you mean, and I'll try and interpret your sentence. I'll try and understand you. Sam says, what is the fretboard on a guitar? What does that mean? Okay, well, great question. Actually, I have my guitar right here, so I'll show you. Let me just switch back to my screen. So this is a fretboard on the guitar. Each one of these little lines here is a fret. Okay, so fret 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So those are frets on a guitar. That's what a fretboard, and the whole board is a fretboard. That's what that is. Okay. I fret about my future plans, says TT. I often fret about my future plans too. I'm fretting about them right now, especially. I'm probably going to move back to Canada in a couple of months, and yeah, I'm fretting about that, so I can relate. Okay, Gopheron says, I fret about talking in English on the phone. We need to say on the phone. We don't say in phone. I fret about talking in English on the phone. Okay, great sentence, and yeah, it's I can relate to that. I actually tried to order. What was it? I think I tried to order pizza a few weeks ago. Normally, my girlfriend does that when we're spending time together, and we want to eat pizza. Sorry. And I had to call this time. She wasn't here, and I wanted pizza. So I had to call, and it was just a disaster of a conversation. I was very nervous on the phone trying to speak in Korean, so I can relate to that. But keep studying, and you will get there. Permanently moving back to Canada? Yes, I think so, at least for now. That's the plan. So that's something that I'm fretting about right now in my own life. Abo says, I'm not understand what you mean, hold down or hold back. They're quite similar, but I think when I hear hold down, we use that a lot more often to talk about physically holding something down. So imagine, like I said before, a police officer holding someone down physically with their hands, whereas hold back, you can use that to talk about someone who's physically holding someone back too, but we use hold back in a more abstract sense. So it's holding me back from reaching my potential. Okay, so you could, let's say someone has a drinking problem, they're addicted to alcohol. You can say his alcohol addiction is holding him back from becoming what he could be. You could talk about it like that. Sam says, I always fret about examinations. That is normal, Sam, so I think that's a good thing, actually. There was a study done that looked at people, how nervous people feel before an exam, and compared how nervous people feel to the actual result they achieve, and they found that feeling a little nervous before exams is actually a good thing. When people aren't nervous at all, they do poorly, and when people are too nervous, when they're so nervous that they can't concentrate, they also do poorly on the exam. So feeling the right amount of nerves, the right amount of anxiety is actually a good thing. It lets you know that you're doing well, or that you're in the right state of mind, at least. Sadawat says, are we still having this class when you move back? Absolutely, Sadawat. Don't worry. It's going to be a little hectic for a while, but my plans when I move back to Canada, I want to work on this full time. That's my plan. I want to really try and do online teaching in English. I mean, I started a few months ago. I really enjoy it. It's very difficult for me right now because I'm still working a full-time job, so I do a lot of this work at school. I plan for these lessons a lot when I'm at school, but when I move back to Canada, I really want to try and make this a full-time thing. So I'm fretting about the future because it's very uncertain right now, but that's what's happening. Those are my plans. To hold down equals to fix equals not let move. Yeah, so GoFriend, we're talking more about exactly not letting someone move. So imagine this is a person here, and they're trying to move, and another person is holding them down and preventing them from moving. That's what the phrasal verb hold down means. I fret about not having your lessons. Sadawat, don't worry, you'll have my lessons. It will be okay. Okay, so let's go back and finish this lesson. It actually went quicker than I thought it would. But let's talk about what happens next with Pinocchio. Okay, what happens next? Well, he starts singing this song, and what's funny is, if you watch the video, he starts singing, "I've got no strings to hold me down," and he immediately falls. He trips down the stairs and makes a silly mistake. He falls in front of the audience, and the audience starts laughing at him. They think that he's a joke. They really like him, but they like him because he's kind of funny and this joke. So they're laughing at him. And afterwards, what happens? He's the person in charge of this puppet show, the promoter. He locks Pinocchio in a cage. He locks Pinocchio in a cage, and Pinocchio's stuck. He's in trouble. So he didn't listen to his conscience. He wanted to become famous and act and do all these nice things. He wanted to take the easy road to success, the easy road to becoming a real boy. And what happened? Well, he started becoming too confident, I think. He thought, he was singing, "I've got no strings." And again, like we talked about, he's got no strings literally, but there's also this other meaning in this song. He's got no strings. He's kind of free, he's saying. He's overconfident with himself, it seems. He feels like he's already a real boy, in a sense. At least that's how I interpret it. And what happens? Because of that, he's thrown into a cage. He does the wrong thing. He doesn't listen to his conscience, and there are real consequences because of that. So he's saying, "I don't have these responsibilities, I don't have these strings," but in reality, he does. He can't avoid his conscience. The consequences are very real, as he realizes, and as the audience realizes. While I have you, since we do have time, why don't you tell me what you think about this song? Again, so this is one of those questions where I'm asking you to not worry about your grammar so much. Just try and express yourself in English, and I will look at your sentence and paragraph, and I'll try and rephrase it in a natural way. And I hope that helps you as English learners. I hope that when I do that stuff, it does help you. So tell me, what do you think about this song, about this? How would you interpret this song after all of the things we talked about? After learning about the idiom, no strings attached, how would you interpret this song? Another thing too, the word fret. He's saying, "I have nothing to fret about. I have no worries now. I'm a real boy." And of course, that's just total crap, as he quickly finds out. But yeah, I'd love to know your interpretation of this, because I think it's a really, it's a fascinating movie and also a fascinating point in the movie. It's there's a lot of stuff going on here beyond the lyrics. It's a very deep song and a deep movie. Frown. Okay, Sadawat says frown. I thought that might be confusing, but frown is just kind of the opposite of a smile. So if you like, that's my best frown for you right there. But yeah, a frown is just the opposite of a smile. It's a sad face. So he's saying, "I have nothing to frown about." That's what that is. Here, I can type something actually. This is a frown. There you go. That's a frown. Alan says, "I'm fretting about the future because I will be old and most probably I won't be able to do my life's needs." Yeah, Alan, that's I think that's something that we all fret about, right? It's that's this game of life that we're all playing, and it happens. That's in many ways that's kind of the main question of life. How do you deal with how brutal life is, all the suffering that you're going to encounter? How do you live through that? How do you cope with that? So I think we can all empathize with you. That's a question that we all have to struggle with. But here's how I would maybe rephrase that more naturally. I am fretting about my future because I will be old and most likely unable to meet my needs or meet my life's needs, you could say. It's a difficult one to put all together. But yeah, that's about everything that I have for you today. It looks like the comment section is a little quiet right now, but thank you all for participating tonight. I know I hope you enjoy these lessons where I talk more about movies or songs or whatever. I enjoy doing them. It's my favorite thing to do when teaching English. I think there's a lot to be learned, of course, from English that is used in movies and songs and just culture in general. Okay? We've got another sentence here from Gofran. It says, in life, when you don't follow your conscience, then assume your responsibility and deserve what happens to you. Okay, so I think that's your interpretation of this movie and this song. Yeah, I think that's right. Well, Pinocchio, he doesn't follow his conscience, right? He doesn't listen to his conscience. He rejects the responsibility. He says, I have no strings, no responsibility, and he gets what he deserves, in a sense, right? He's locked in a cage. Bad things happen. He doesn't do what's right, and bad things happen. So yes, I agree with you, Gofran. I think that's a good way to interpret what happens here. And of course, we experience this in our own life too. Sadawat was talking earlier about when telling lies and being untruthful and feeling a guilty conscience about that. Yes, and what happens when you tell a lie is you don't want to go down that road because it leads you to bad places. When you're doing things that aren't true to yourself, when you're not listening to your conscience, bad things happen. It happens to Pinocchio and it happens to us. Okay, Sam says, when making some important decisions in life, we're supposed to hear inner conscience. Otherwise, we'll be like a puppet. Right, there's also, so I'm glad you pointed that out. There's also this image of the puppet, of something that's controlled and kind of pathetic in a way. And yeah, I think that you can think about that. When we're not listening to our conscience, we're not doing what's true to ourselves. We're kind of losing control of ourselves. We kind of, in some sense, we lose control of the hold we have on ourselves, and we do things that we shouldn't do. Right, Sadawat says, this song teaches us to not be overconfident. Listen. Oh, Sadawat message retracted instantly as I read that. Okay, but again, I agree with you, the first part at least, about not being overly confident. There's a great English word too that a vocabulary word, hubris, and it just means overconfident, basically, cocky. Cocky is another good word that we use a lot of the time. Okay? So, I think Pinocchio character was so naive and easily trusts con artists, right? Well, yeah, exactly. He's a little boy and he has to find out how to live. He's trying to figure out how to live. So he is naive. He is totally innocent. And he's very, very easily influenced. He meets someone who influences him in the wrong way, who tricks him, and he's easily tempted by that. It just seems so good. So he goes, he says, to hell with my conscience. This seems like a good opportunity, and bad things happen. And he learns along the way. Jacob, if you don't mind, would you please play Strumming for Your Guitar? Yes, okay, well, listen, I will play you a song as I say goodbye. I'll just make it up. We'll see what happens. Thank you all for listening to this live lesson. I'll see you next time. I will probably see you next week on Tuesday. So thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are watching from. Thank you so much. Okay, that was so embarrassing. I'm going to leave now, but it was a pleasure being with you, as always. If you have any more questions or comments, let me know in the comment section, and I will see you in the next live lesson. Have a good weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.